She believed she had found true love, until she realized she was in a toxic relationship, just like her mother. Lucy Henderson watched through the bus window as the vehicle followed a winding road by the seaside. The coastal wind gently tousled her wavy brown hair, and the salty breeze seeping through the cracks in the window seemed to promise a new life far from the chaos of the big city she had left behind. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and reflecting on the ocean's waters. She held tightly onto her bag strap, her heart beating faster in anticipation of what was to come. After years of living in a turbulent environment marked by a toxic relationship and a childhood full of painful memories, Lucy decided it was time to start over. At nearly 30 years old, she finally had the chance to find peace and purpose in a place where no one knew her past. The bus finally stopped in the small coastal town that would be her new home. Lucy stepped off with her bags, feeling the firm ground beneath her feet as she took a deep breath of the fresh ocean air. The town was charming, with its colorful houses, local shops, and a lighthouse in the distance that seemed to watch over the community. The cobblestone streets led to a small central square where children played under the watchful eyes of their parents. Lucy walked to the house she had rented, a small and charming wooden residence with a porch overlooking the sea. The house, though simple, had a charm that made her feel welcomed. The porch was adorned with colorful flower pots, and a wooden swing hung from the ceiling, inviting her to sit and relax. Entering the house, Lucy set her bags down on the floor and looked around. The walls were painted white, reflecting the sunlight and brightening the room. The old wooden floor creaked under her feet, and the furniture was rustic but comfortable. She smiled, feeling that she had made the right choice. The small kitchen was equipped with everything she needed, and the bedroom, with a bed covered in a floral quilt, seemed like a refuge of tranquility. After settling in, Lucy walked to the studio she had set up at the back of the house. As an artist, she had always found in her canvases and brushes a way to express her deepest feelings, and that studio was the perfect space to restart her career. The room was spacious and bright, with large windows letting in natural light, reflecting on the blank canvases ready to be filled with colors and emotions. Lucy began unpacking her paints and brushes, organizing everything with care. She knew that life in the big city was full of distractions and noises that stifled her creativity. But there, in that small seaside studio, she felt she could reconnect with her art in a deeper and more authentic way. The next day, while exploring the town, Lucy met some of her neighbors. Everyone seemed friendly and welcoming, greeting her with smiles and brief conversations about the weather or the best places to eat in town. It was during one of these walks that she met Jack, a renowned photographer who had been living there for a few years. He was in the central square, adjusting his camera while capturing the town's simple beauty. Jack had a magnetic presence, tall, with light brown hair falling over his forehead and green eyes that seemed to see beyond surfaces. He quickly caught Lucy's attention. When he saw her watching, he smiled warmly and approached. "You must be the new resident," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Jack, the local photographer and admirer of this view." Lucy laughed, accepting the handshake. "Nice to meet you. I'm Lucy. I don't think I'll ever get tired of looking at this view." The conversation flowed naturally, and Lucy felt an immediate connection with Jack. He talked about his work as a photographer, capturing unique moments and the stories behind the images he recorded. Jack also seemed to be searching for something deeper, a genuine connection he couldn't find in the big cities where he used to work. Over time, Lucy and Jack began meeting more often, sharing stories and supporting each other in their creative journeys. She started to believe that perhaps this new beginning could include not only a new professional life, but also the possibility of a true relationship. As the sun set once again on the horizon, painting the sky orange and red, Lucy sat on the porch of her new home, watching the waves break on the beach. For the first time in a long while, She felt a spark of hope and the possibility of a different life, where the past would no longer dictate her future. The days in the small coastal town passed peacefully, and Lucy began to adjust to the serene routine. The constant sound of the waves breaking on the beach and the birds singing in the mornings gave a new rhythm to her life, so different from the hustle and bustle of the big city. In this new environment, her work as an artist flourished, and she felt she had finally found a place where she could express herself freely. Jack, the photographer she had met in the central square, became a constant presence in her life. They met frequently, sharing long conversations about art, photography, and life in general. Jack was charming, with a contagious passion for what he did. His ability to capture beauty in the simplest things was something Lucy deeply admired. They began collaborating creatively, with Jack suggesting themes for Lucy's paintings and her offering insights into his photographic compositions. This natural partnership seemed to bring them closer together, and it didn't take long for an intense attraction to develop between them. One sunny afternoon, Jack invited Lucy to join him for a photo shoot on the cliffs that rose above the ocean. The wind was strong there, and the view was stunning. Lucy watched as Jack captured the grandeur of the surrounding nature, his passion for photography evident in every click of the camera. He called her over to see the images, and when she approached, she felt his hand lightly touch hers, a subtle gesture that made her blush. The look they exchanged was full of unspoken meanings, and Lucy knew that something more was forming between them. After the photo session, they returned to Jack's house, a cozy and artistic cabin with walls covered in framed photos capturing breathtaking moments from his travels around the world. He offered her a glass of wine, and they sat on the porch, where the sound of the distant waves created an almost magical atmosphere. "You have an incredible talent, Lucy," Jack said, looking at her intently. "Not just as an artist, but as a person. There's something about you that makes me want to be better." Lucy smiled, flattered but also feeling a slight discomfort. Though she enjoyed Jack's attention, there was something in his words and intensity that put her on alert. Still, she ignored her instincts, wanting to believe she was just being paranoid because of her past experiences. As the days turned into weeks, their relationship evolved. Jack began spending more time at Lucy's house, helping her with art projects and even suggesting that they do a joint exhibition in town. Lucy was thrilled by the idea, and for a time, it seemed that everything was falling perfectly into place. However, small cracks began to appear in Jack's perfect facade. He became jealous when Lucy mentioned other men, even if they were just friends or acquaintances from town. There were times when he made subtle comments about the clothes she wore or how she should behave in public, always disguised as well-intentioned advice. One night, during dinner at a local restaurant, Lucy casually mentioned that she was thinking of enrolling in an art workshop led by a renowned artist who would be visiting the town. Jack's expression immediately changed, his eyes, once warm, now gleaming with something darker. "You don't need that," he said sharply, placing his fork down with more force than he intended. "Your work is great as it is. Why worry about seeking validation from someone outside?" Lucy was surprised by his reaction, but tried to downplay the discomfort she felt. "I just thought it would be a good opportunity to learn something new and get inspired," she replied, trying to sound casual. Jack sighed, as if trying to control his frustration. "I just think you already have everything you need here. You don't need anything more." Jack's insistence was unsettling, but Lucy chose not to continue the discussion. She felt the weight of growing doubt in her chest, but forced herself to believe that Jack was just trying to protect her, that his concern was an expression of affection. Even so, his behavior began to resonate with something familiar and disturbing. The small signs of control and possessiveness he exhibited reminded Lucy of how her father treated her mother and how it had shaped her childhood in a painful way. These thoughts began to haunt her, but she tried to push them away, believing she was overreacting. Over time, Jack's controlling behavior began to intensify. He questioned Lucy about every outing, every person she spoke to, and made sure to always be present. What initially seemed like a demonstration of affection now began to suffocate her. Lucy started to feel trapped in a dangerous cycle, with Jack oscillating between being the charming man she fell in love with and someone whose temper left her in a constant state of alert. She knew she needed to make a decision, but she was torn between the fear of repeating the past and the hope that things might get better. As she looked out at the sea, sitting on her porch, Lucy couldn't help but think of the promises she had made to herself never to let herself be drawn into a situation like this. But now, living in the midst of the turmoil, she didn't know how to escape, fearing that by trying to break free, she might lose everything she had fought so hard to gain. Jack's behavior continued to intensify, and Lucy, increasingly disturbed, began to relive moments from her childhood that she had tried to bury for so long. Jack's words and actions awakened memories of her father, which became more vivid as the days went by. One morning, while preparing her coffee, Lucy found herself staring into space, lost in thoughts that took her back to her childhood home. The cup in her hands trembled slightly as the memory of her father's intimidating presence invaded her mind. He was a man who controlled everything around him with rigid and cruel authority. Lucy remembered how he commanded the house with a severe look and words that cut like blades. As a child, Lucy did her best to please her father in the hope of avoiding his outbursts of anger. She remembered the nights when he would come home in a bad mood and take out his frustrations on the family, especially her mother. The emotional abuse was constant, and her mother, a sweet and caring woman, did what she could to protect her daughters, bearing the burden of the situation alone. The fights were frequent, and the sound of shouting and slamming doors became a common soundtrack in her childhood. Little Lucy used to hide in her room, covering her ears with her hands, trying to ignore the harsh words echoing through the house. She remembered the paralyzing fear she felt, fearing what might happen if she did something wrong. One time, when she was about 9 years old, her father harshly reprimanded her for accidentally breaking a glass. That moment was etched in her memory, not for the reprimand itself, but for how her father made her feel insignificant, as if she were a burden. From then on, Lucy developed a constant need for approval, a deep desire to please others to avoid conflicts. Over time, her mother began to wither under the weight of the abuse. Lucy remembered seeing her mother cry in silence while trying to keep the house in order and her daughters safe. But there was a constant sadness in her mother's eyes, a reflection of the life she never wanted but found herself trapped in due to circumstances and the fear of starting over alone. These memories haunted Lucy, especially now as she began to notice the signs of control and manipulation in Jack. He wasn't violent like her father, but the pattern of behavior was frighteningly similar. The small criticisms, the way he made her feel guilty for wanting something different, the constant need to know where she was and with whom. All of it was a repetition of what she had witnessed in her own home. Lucy began to isolate herself. The fear that her relationship with Jack could escalate into something worse made her withdraw, but at the same time, she felt a strange loyalty to him. It was as if part of her believed she could change him, that he wasn't really like that, and that perhaps he was just going through a difficult phase. This hope that things could improve kept her trapped even when her instincts screamed for her to leave. Lucy's anguish grew day by day. She knew she needed to do something, but she was torn between the fear of being alone and the fear of repeating the cycle of abuse she had witnessed in her childhood. She began having nightmares, reliving scenes from her childhood where she was unable to help her mother, feeling helpless and lost. One of those nights, Lucy woke up drenched in cold sweat, her heart racing. The dream had been so real that she could smell the coffee her mother made every morning, an attempt to create normalcy amid the chaos. Lucy decided that she couldn't continue like this. She couldn't let the past dictate her future and needed to find a way to break the cycle, not just for herself, but in memory of her mother, who had sacrificed so much to protect her daughters. With this newfound determination, Lucy began to reflect on the choices she had made so far and how her life was starting to mirror what she had always promised herself to avoid. She knew something had to change, but she still didn't know how to take the first step. Lucy was in her studio, trying to focus on a new painting, but her thoughts were far away. The memories of her childhood and Jack's recent behavior wouldn't leave her in peace. The sound of the waves breaking in the distance, which used to be a source of comfort, now only seemed to amplify her internal discomfort. Suddenly, the phone rang, interrupting her daydream. She quickly got up and answered, expecting something routine. But the voice on the other end of the line was her sister Rachel's, and the urgency in her tone was unmistakable. "Lucy, I need to talk to you," Rachel began, her voice trembling. I'm in trouble." Lucy felt a tightness in her chest. She hadn't seen Rachel in months, and their contact had become sporadic in recent years. Rachel had always been the more resilient sister, the one who seemed to overcome difficulties with a quiet determination. Hearing her voice broken with emotion made Lucy realize that something was terribly wrong. "Rachel, what happened?" Lucy asked, trying to stay calm. "It's my boyfriend, Tony," Rachel continued hesitantly. He's not who I thought he was. At first, he was wonderful, attentive, but now, he's become controlling, aggressive. I don't know what to do." Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. Rachel's words resonated deeply within her, bringing to the surface all the doubts and fears that had been haunting her lately. She knew exactly what Rachel was going through because she was beginning to experience something similar with Jack. "Rachel, you need to get out of there," Lucy said firmly. "I'm coming to you. We can talk, and I'll help you figure this out." Rachel agreed, and they arranged to meet at Rachel's house in a nearby town. Lucy packed a small bag and, without a second thought, hit the road. During the drive, her thoughts were in turmoil. She wondered how she hadn't noticed the signs in Rachel's life earlier, but at the same time, she knew it was hard to see reality when you were in the middle of it. Upon arriving at Rachel's house, Lucy was greeted with a tight hug. Rachel looked thinner, with deep circles under her eyes, evidence of the suffering she was going through. The two sat down in the small living room, and Rachel began to tell her story, her eyes filled with tears. "He started isolating me from my friends," Rachel began, her voice trembling. "Every time I wanted to go out, he'd make up an excuse for me to stay home. If I got a message, he'd ask who it was and get furious if I didn't show him. I thought it was because he loved me, but now I see it's control." Lucy listened in silence, but every word Rachel spoke made her heart beat faster. It was like hearing a description of her own life. The similarities between Tony and Jack were frightening, and it made her realize how deeply ingrained this type of behavior was in their lives, something that had likely been planted during the childhood they shared. "I know what you're going through," Lucy said softly, holding Rachel's hand. "And I know how hard it is to get out of that situation, but you're not alone. We'll figure this out together." Rachel looked at her sister, surprised and relieved at the same time. "You understand, then? Because it seems like no one else does." "I understand perfectly," Lucy replied. "Jack, he's starting to show the same signs. I came here thinking I was going to help you, but I think I need as much help as you do." The two sisters spent hours talking, sharing their fears and anxieties. Rachel told Lucy about the times she tried to leave Tony but was convinced to return by empty promises of change. Lucy, in turn, talked about Jack, about how he was beginning to control her life, and about the fear she felt of repeating the cycle of abuse they had witnessed in their childhood. "We need to get out of this, Lucy," Rachel said with renewed determination. "We need to be stronger than we were before." Lucy nodded. She knew that to help Rachel, she would also need to help herself. Clarity began to take shape in her mind. She couldn't keep ignoring the signs. She loved Jack, or at least the person she thought he was, but she couldn't allow that to destroy her. Before leaving, Lucy helped Rachel plan her escape from Tony's house. They decided that Rachel would stay with Lucy for a while until she could stabilize. Rachel agreed, and for the first time in months, seemed to breathe more easily. When Lucy returned to the coastal town, something inside her had changed. She knew she needed to confront Jack, that she needed to put an end to the cycle that was beginning to repeat itself in her life. The decision wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. She couldn't let the past continue to dictate her future. As she drove back home, Lucy felt a renewed strength growing inside her. She had Rachel's support, and together they could finally break the cycles of abuse that had trapped them for so long. Lucy knew the road ahead would be difficult, but now she was ready to face it head-on, with no more fear. Back in the coastal town, Lucy felt different. The conversation with Rachel had reignited an inner strength she hadn't known she still had. As she opened the door to her house, the familiarity of the surroundings should have brought comfort, but instead, it only reinforced the urgency of what she needed to do. The day after her return, Lucy decided to talk to Jack. She knew the confrontation would be difficult, but she also knew it was necessary. As she prepared breakfast, she heard the sound of Jack's car parking outside. Her heart began to race, but she took a deep breath, preparing herself for what was to come. Jack entered the house as if nothing were wrong, with his usual smile and a box of pastries he had bought at the local bakery. "I thought of you when I passed by," he said, kissing her on the cheek. Lucy forced a smile and accepted the box, but she could no longer ignore the weight she felt in her chest. "Jack, we need to talk," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He noticed the serious tone, and immediately his expression changed. "About what?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "About us," Lucy replied, placing the box of pastries on the table. "I've been thinking a lot lately, especially after visiting my sister, and I think our relationship isn't working as it should." Jack frowned, clearly surprised and bothered by the direction the conversation was taking. "What do you mean? I thought we were fine." "I thought so too for a while," Lucy began, carefully choosing her words. "But lately, I've been noticing some things that make me uncomfortable. You've been controlling, jealous, and I feel like I'm losing my own identity. This reminds me a lot of what I saw when I was a child, and I can't let that continue." Jack looked at her, perplexed, and then his gaze hardened. "You're overreacting, Lucy. I only care about you. I only want what's best. And now you're going to compare me to your father? That's ridiculous." Lucy winced at his tone, but didn't let herself be intimidated. "I know it's hard to understand, but I need to be honest with myself and with you. I can't continue in a relationship where I feel suffocated. I can't go back to being the girl who lived in fear." Jack took a step forward, his face contorted with anger and disbelief. "So you think you can just throw everything away? Everything we've built? Because of some insecurities you have? That's crazy, Lucy." She stepped back slightly but kept her stance firm. "I need to do this for myself, Jack, and for you too. This isn't good for either of us." He shook his head, as if trying to understand what was happening, but it was clear that anger was starting to take over, a situation he wasn't used to. "If you walk out that door, Lucy, there's no coming back," he threatened, his voice cold. Lucy looked at him, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. She knew this was the decisive moment, the point of no return. "I know," she replied, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. "And that's why I need to go." Without waiting any longer, Lucy grabbed her keys and walked out the door, leaving Jack alone in the room. She heard him shout her name, but she didn't turn back. Every step she took felt lighter, as if she were finally breaking free from an invisible chain that had held her captive for so long. As she got into the car, Lucy took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of the decision she had made. She knew Jack wouldn't easily accept the breakup, and she was prepared to deal with the consequences. However, she also knew that for the first time in a long time, she had chosen herself instead of submitting to someone else's control. In the days that followed, Jack began to show up unexpectedly at Lucy's house, leaving flowers at her door, sending incessant text messages, trying in every way to win her back. But the tone of the messages soon changed from pleading to aggressive, with him demanding explanations, insisting on answers Lucy had already given. Lucy began to feel increasingly scared and disturbed by Jack's actions. He started appearing at places she frequented, as if he were following her. The messages became threatening, and the sense of freedom she had gained began to fade, replaced by fear. That's when Rachel came to her aid. Knowing Jack wouldn't give up easily, Rachel insisted that Lucy seek legal help. Together, they went to a lawyer specializing in domestic violence and stalking, who advised them on how to proceed. Lucy filed a restraining order against Jack, a difficult but necessary step. Throughout the process, Rachel was by her side, offering the emotional support Lucy so desperately needed. Rachel had also managed to leave her abusive relationship with Tony, and with the two sisters facing their problems together, a new strength emerged between them. Lucy realized that despite everything, she wasn't alone. The cycle of abuse and control was being broken, and with each passing day, she felt safer and more confident. Jack continued trying to contact her, but the restraining order and constant monitoring by local police prevented him from getting close. Finally, after weeks of tension and fear, calm began to return to Lucy's life. Jack gave up stalking her, and she could breathe a sigh of relief, knowing she had made the right choice. Lucy and Rachel continued to support each other, rebuilding their lives with the certainty that together they were stronger than any shadow from the past. With Jack finally out of her life, Lucy felt as if a great cloud had dissipated, allowing the sun to shine again. The tension that had hung over her for so long began to fade, and for the first time in months, she could take a deep breath without feeling the crushing weight of fear and doubt. The restraining order had been a crucial step in ensuring her safety, and Rachel's constant presence by her side gave her the strength to carry on. Lucy began to rebuild her routine, dedicating more time to her art and her life in the small coastal town. The tranquility of the sea and the beauty of the place once again inspired her in ways she hadn't felt in a long time. The canvases that had once been covered in dark strokes now began to fill with vibrant and lively colors, reflecting her new outlook on life. Rachel, who was staying at Lucy's house for a while, also began to recover from her own trauma. The two sisters, united by pain and the determination to break the cycles of abuse that had marked their lives, found support in each other. Rachel had left Tony for good, cutting all ties with him and focusing on her own healing. Lucy and Rachel often spent their mornings together, chatting on the porch as they sipped coffee and gazed out at the ocean. In these conversations, they reminisced about the past, but now with a different perspective, a recognition that the difficult experiences they had lived through had shaped them but didn't have to define their future. "I never imagined we'd go through something like this," Rachel said one day, looking out at the horizon. "But in a way, it brought us even closer." Lucy nodded, feeling the depth of her sister's words. "It's true, and maybe that's what makes it all worthwhile. Knowing that despite everything, we managed to come out stronger." Rachel smiled, a smile that had once been rare on her face. "You're much stronger than you think, Lucy. I always knew that, even when you doubted yourself." Those words of support and love were a balm for Lucy. She began to realize that true strength wasn't just in enduring, but in having the courage to change, to break free from situations that harmed her, and to forge a new path. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Lucy and Rachel's lives began to stabilize, and the pain of the past was slowly being replaced by new memories, built on trust, love, and understanding. They continued to support each other, always vigilant to never again allow anyone to control or diminish them. Each of them charted her own path, but they always knew they could count on each other in any situation. Now fully immersed in her art, Lucy began to gain recognition as one of the leading artists in the region. Her new collection of works, titled Rebirth, was praised by local critics and attracted the attention of art galleries from other cities. As she looked to the future, Lucy knew she had broken the cycles of abuse that had marked her life and her sister's. She was finally in control of her destiny and was determined to make something beautiful and meaningful out of it. And so, the Henderson sisters, once shaped by pain, now define themselves by their strength, resilience, and the promise never to let the past control their lives again. They had found their freedom, and together, they were ready to live fully. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.